The blizzard should have killed her. Everyone said so. A heavy-set woman with no mountain experience riding straight into white death to save a man the town wanted dead anyway. But Mara Whitaker wasn't thinking about survival when she heard the trapper was bleeding out in that cabin. She was thinking about all the years people looked through her like she was glass, all the whispers, all the dismissals. Maybe that's why she didn't hesitate when Sheriff Reeves tried to block her path. Maybe that's why she grabbed those medical supplies and rode into hell itself. Stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. The wind hit like a fist. Mara Whitaker pulled her coat tighter, but it didn't matter. The cold found every gap, every weak seam, working its way through wool and cotton until it pressed against her skin like something alive. Her horse, a sturdy mare named Dolly, fought against the gusts with her head low, ears pinned flat. The trail had disappeared 20 minutes ago. Now there was only white, endless, suffocating white that turned the world into nothing. She was going to die out here. The thought came calm and clear, like someone else had whispered it in her ear. Mara blinked ice from her eyelashes and kept riding. Death could wait. She'd lived 34 years being invisible. Dying alone on a mountain seemed almost fitting, except she wasn't alone. Somewhere ahead, if the directions held true, Colt Mercer was bleeding to death in a cabin he'd built with his own hands. The town meeting had happened 6 hours ago, though it felt like days. Mara had been inventorying medical supplies in the back room of Doc Patterson's office when she heard the commotion outside. Raised voices, the kind that pulled people from their homes and shops, hungry for drama. She'd walked to the doorway and stopped. The entire town had gathered in the street. Sheriff Dalton Reeves stood on the general store's porch, tall and broad-shouldered in his fur-lined coat, addressing the crowd like some kind of frontier prophet. His voice carried even over the rising wind. "I'm telling you straight, the man's as good as dead already." Reeves adjusted his hat, scanning the faces below him. Mountain Trapper comes into town twice a year if we're lucky, keeps to himself, doesn't contribute nothing to this community. Now he's up there torn apart by a bear, probably frozen by now, and you want me to risk men's lives in this storm? "He's still a person," someone called out. Mary Chen, the seamstress. Her voice shook but held firm. Reeves smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Sure he is. A person who chose to live like an animal up there. Actions have consequences, Mary. The mountain gives and the mountain takes. That's frontier law." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Not everyone. Mara saw some troubled faces, people shifting their weight and avoiding eye contact, but enough. Enough to make Reeves confident. "Besides," the sheriff continued, "even if we wanted to help, the storm's getting worse. Trail's already half buried. Sending someone up there now would be sending them to their grave." That's when Mara had pushed through the crowd. She hadn't planned to speak. Words usually died in her throat before they reached her mouth, killed by years of learning that what she said didn't matter. But something about Reeves's smile, about the casual way he'd written off a man's life, made her voice work. "I'll go." The crowd had turned as one, faces registering surprise, confusion, then something worse, pity mixed with contempt. Mara felt her cheeks burn, but she held Reeves's gaze. The sheriff's smile widened. "Miss Whitaker, didn't see you there." He always said it like that, like she was so easy to miss. "That's real noble of you, but I don't think—" "I know the mountain trails," Mara interrupted. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I've ridden them before. And I'm a nurse. If Colt Mercer's hurt, he needs medical attention." "When have you ridden those trails?" Reeves's tone was indulgent, like he was humoring a child. "Day trips to pick herbs don't count, sweetheart. We're talking about the high country in a blizzard." "I can do it." Someone in the crowd laughed. Mara didn't look to see who. "Look at her, Dalton," a voice called out. "Pete Morgan, the blacksmith. She can barely get on a horse without help. You want to send her up the mountain? That's murder, not rescue." More laughter, harder this time. Mara's face went hot. Her size had always been the town's favorite joke. Too heavy, too slow, too much of everything except what mattered. Reeves held up a hand, quieting the crowd. "Pete's got a point, Miss Whitaker. No offense intended, but this isn't a job for, well, it requires a certain level of physical capability, and frankly, I'm not sure Colt Mercer is worth dying over." "Then why did you call this meeting?" The question came out sharper than Mara intended. Reeves's smile faltered for just a second. Civic duty. Making sure everyone knows the situation, that's all. But you won't help him. Can't help him. There's a difference. The sheriff's voice hardened slightly. Now I appreciate your spirit truly, but this discussion is over. Everyone go home. Stay warm. Wait out the storm. The crowd had begun to disperse, relieved to return to their warm houses and forget about the dying man on the mountain. But Mara hadn't moved. She'd stood there in the middle of the street, watching Reeves watch her, and something clicked into place. He didn't want anyone going up there. It wasn't about the storm or the danger. Reeves was actively preventing rescue. The realization had settled in her stomach like a stone. Now, hours later, that stone felt heavier with every mile. The wind screamed around her, and Dolly stumbled on hidden ice beneath the snow. Mara grabbed the saddle horn, steadying herself, and pushed forward. She'd left town through the back trails, avoiding the main road where Reeves might have posted men. Not that he probably thought she'd actually try it. Nobody expected fat, quiet Mara Whitaker to do anything unexpected. That was her advantage. The medical bag banged against her hip. Bandages, carbolic acid, laudanum, needles, and gut for stitching. She'd raided Doc Patterson's supplies, leaving money on the counter even though the old doctor was passed out drunk in his office chair. He wouldn't notice until morning anyway. The temperature dropped as she climbed higher. Mara's fingers ached even through her gloves, and her face had gone numb an hour ago. She tried to remember the landmarks the old trappers talked about when they came to town. The split pine, the boulder shaped like a sleeping bear, the creek that ran year-round. Everything looked the same in the whiteout. Dolly suddenly stopped, head high, ears forward. "What is it, girl?" The wind shifted and Mara caught it. Smoke. Faint but distinct, the smell of burning wood. "Good girl," she whispered, patting the mare's neck. "Good girl, find it." Dolly moved forward with more confidence now, following scent instead of sight. The trees thickened around them, providing some shelter from the worst of the wind. Mara's hope rose cautiously. If there was smoke, someone was alive enough to tend a fire. The cabin materialized out of the storm like something from a dream. It was smaller than she'd expected. Rough-hewn logs chinked with mud and moss. A stone chimney trailing thin smoke into the white sky. A small stable stood nearby, empty. No horse, no sounds except the wind and the creak of stressed timber. Mara dismounted, her legs nearly buckling when they hit the ground. She'd been riding for over 4 hours. She led Dolly to the stable, got her inside and out of the wind, then grabbed her medical bag and approached the cabin door. She knocked. "Colt Mercer? Mr. Mercer, are you in there?" Nothing. She tried the latch. Unlocked. The door swung inward on leather hinges. The smell hit her first. Blood, an infection, sweat, and something feral she couldn't name. The cabin's single room was dim, lit only by the dying fire in the hearth. It took her eyes a moment to adjust. Then she saw him. Colt Mercer lay on a low bed against the far wall, covered in furs that were stained dark with blood. His face was gray, slick with fever sweat, and his breathing came in shallow gasps. Even from across the room, Mara could see the extent of the damage. The bear had destroyed him. She moved quickly, setting down her bag, feeding the fire, lighting the oil lamps. As the room brightened, the full horror became clear. Colt's left arm was shredded from shoulder to wrist, deep gouges that had torn through muscle to scrape bone. His chest bore massive claw marks, 4 parallel furrows that had ripped through his shirt and deep into the flesh beneath. His left leg was twisted at a wrong angle, broken, probably when he'd tried to escape. But he was breathing. Against all odds, the man was still breathing. Mara pulled off her coat and rolled up her sleeves. She'd trained under Doc Patterson for 6 years, assisting with everything from childbirths to amputations. She'd seen bad wounds before. This was worse. "Mr. Mercer," she said loudly, moving to his side. "Can you hear me?" His eyes opened. Just slits, but open. They were blue, she noticed, the color of deep water. "Who?" His voice was barely a rasp. "My name is Mara Whitaker. I'm a nurse. I came from Black Hollow." His eyes widened slightly. "Storm, I know, don't talk, save your strength." She touched his forehead, burning hot. The infection was already taking hold. "I need to clean these wounds. It's going to hurt." "Let me die." "Absolutely not." Mara opened her medical bag, pulling out supplies with practiced efficiency. I didn't ride through hell to watch you quit now. Something that might have been a laugh rattled in his chest, then turned into a groan of pain. Mara worked through the night. She cleaned the wounds with carbolic acid while Colt screamed. The sound was awful, animal, but it meant he was still fighting. She stitched what could be stitched, using tiny, precise sutures to close the deepest lacerations. The arm was bad, possibly unsalvageable, but she wrapped it tight and elevated it, hoping to save the limb. The chest wounds were worse. One had come dangerously close to his heart. Another had punctured into his lung. She could hear the wet, sucking sound when he breathed. She packed it with clean cloth soaked in iodine and wrapped his entire torso, tight enough to support the damaged tissue, but not so tight he couldn't breathe. The broken leg she set as best she could, using 2 straight branches she found by the woodpile as splints. Colt had passed out by then, which was a mercy. Around 3 a.m, she forced laudanum down his throat and sat back, exhausted. The cabin was warm now, the fire roaring. Outside, the storm continued its assault. Mara knew she couldn't leave even if she wanted to. The return trip would be suicide in the dark with the blizzard at full strength. She was trapped here until the weather broke. She made coffee from Colt's supplies, real coffee, probably traded for furs, and drank it while watching him breathe. The laudanum had finally given him some peace. His face, what she could see of it under the beard and blood, was younger than she'd expected. Maybe 40. Hard to tell with frontier men. The mountain aged them fast. She found herself studying him in the lamplight. Strong features, even ravaged by fever. Scars on his hands and forearms, old ones from years of rough living. A life alone. Like her. Not alone in the same way, of course. Mara lived in town, surrounded by people, but surrounded wasn't the same as seen. She'd spent her entire adult life invisible, fading into backgrounds, dismissed before she finished speaking. The fat nurse, the spinster, the woman nobody wanted. Out here, in this isolated cabin with a dying man, she felt more present than she had in years. Dawn came slowly, the storm refusing to break. Mara checked Colt's wounds, changing bandages, monitoring for fresh bleeding. The fever hadn't broken, but it hadn't spiked either. He was holding steady. Around noon, his eyes opened. Still, here. His voice was stronger, though still rough. Where else would I be? Mara brought water to his lips, helping him drink. Easy, small sips. He drank, then lay back, studying her face. You're the one from town. The meeting. She was surprised he knew about it. How did you? Deputy. Came yesterday. Morning. Colt's breathing was labored, but he pushed through. Told me, Reeves called meeting, asked if I needed help. What did you say? Said no. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Didn't want charity. Well, you're getting it anyway. Mara adjusted his pillows. And it's not charity, it's human decency. Same thing out here. She wanted to argue, but maybe he was right. The frontier didn't deal in kindness. It dealt in trade, value for value, service for service. Helping someone for no reason was either charity or stupidity. Mara wasn't sure which category she fell into. The deputy said the bear attacked you 2 days ago, she said, checking the chest bandages. Is that right? Colt nodded slowly. Where's your horse? Ran off. Smart. Animal. How did you get back here? His eyes closed. Crawled. Mara's hand stilled. She looked at the door, then at Colt, calculating the distance. The nearest timber where a bear might hunt was at least half a mile from the cabin. He'd crawled half a mile with these injuries. Mr. Mercer. Colt. Colt. She hesitated. The wounds, they're severe, but you're going to survive. The infection is the biggest threat now. If I can keep it controlled for the next few days, you'll make it. He opened his eyes again, that blue gaze sharper now despite the fever. Why'd you come? Because no one else would. That's not reason. Mara sat back, considering. Why had she come? Defiance against Reeves, proving the town wrong? A death wish disguised as heroism? I'm tired of watching people die when I could help them, she said finally. And I'm tired of being told I can't do things because of how I look. Colt was quiet for a long moment. What do you look like? The question caught her off guard. What? Can't see much. Fever. He gestured vaguely at his eyes. What do you look like? Mara felt heat rise in her cheeks. I'm large, heavy. The town says fat. Don't care. What town says? What do you say? No one had ever asked her that. She'd spent so long accepting other people's definitions of her body, she'd never considered defining it herself. I'm strong, she said slowly, testing the words. Strong enough to ride through a blizzard, strong enough to set a broken leg and stitch wounds by lamplight, strong enough to be here when everyone else gave up. Colt's smile was real this time, though it cost him. Then you're exactly what you need to be. Something warm bloomed in Mara's chest, unexpected and dangerous. She pushed it down and stood, busying herself with the fire. You need to rest. I'll make broth if you have anything. Wait. His hand moved weakly toward her. Need to tell you something. It can wait until... No. The urgency in his voice stopped her. The bear wasn't accident. Mara turned slowly. What do you mean? Someone drove it toward me. Colt's breathing quickened with the effort of speaking. Heard whistles, calls, mountain cats. Don't attack, unless threatened. Bears neither. Not like that. You're saying someone deliberately, said it? On me. Yes. His eyes found hers, fever bright but certain. Been trying to get my land, 6 months, offers, threats, finally. Did this. Who? But Mara already knew. The way Reeves had blocked the rescue, his too quick dismissal, the smile that didn't reach his eyes. Sheriff, Colt whispered. Dalton. Reeves. The fire popped in the sudden silence. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin walls. Mara stood frozen, her mind racing through implications. If Colt was right, if Reeves had actually orchestrated this, then coming here had put her in more danger than just the storm. She wasn't just a nurse who'd defied orders, she was a witness to attempted murder, and she'd left town without telling anyone where she was going. Why does he want your land? She asked quietly. Water, timber, mountain pass. Colt coughed, a wet sound that made Mara wince. Worth fortune, but need my claim to access it, legally. So he tried to kill you and make it look like an animal attack. Yes. And the meeting was to make sure no one came to help. Yes. Mara moved to the window, looking out at the white wilderness. The storm showed no signs of stopping. Even if she wanted to leave now, wanted to run back to town and report this to... Who? The territorial marshal was 3 days' ride away in good weather. The mayor was Reeves's cousin. The town council did whatever the sheriff told them. She was alone out here with a man who'd just accused the most powerful person in Black Hollow of murder. You think I'm crazy, Colt said behind her. Fever, talking. No. Mara turned back to him. No, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're telling the truth. How can you be sure? Because I saw his face when I said I'd come help you. She returned to his bedside, checking his pulse. Still fast, still thready. He didn't want anyone reaching you. I thought it was just callousness, but it was more than that. He was afraid. Of what? Of you surviving to tell someone what happened. Colt's hand found hers, his grip weak but insistent. You need to leave. When storm breaks, go back. Forget. You found me. I'm not leaving you. If he knows you're here, then he already knows. Mara squeezed his hand gently. I didn't exactly sneak out of town quietly. Half the settlement probably saw me ride out. Reeves will know where I went. Then you're in danger. I was in danger the moment I decided to help you. She smiled, surprising herself. Might as well see it through. Colt studied her face for a long moment. You're either very brave or very stupid. Can it be both? He laughed, actually laughed, then groaned as the movement pulled his stitches. Don't make me laugh. Hurts. Then stop saying funny things. Mara released his hand and stood. I'm going to make that broth now. You need nutrients if you're going to heal. Mara. She stopped. He'd used her first name. Thank you, Colt said quietly. For coming. For caring. You're welcome. She turned away quickly, not trusting her voice. No one had thanked her for carrying in longer than she could remember. The town took her help for granted, the fat nurse who had nothing better to do than tend to other people's needs. But Colt saw it differently. He saw her choice, her courage, her deliberate act of defiance and compassion. He saw her. The storm finally broke on the third day. Mara had spent the time monitoring Colt's recovery, changing bandages, forcing broth and water down his throat, fighting the infection with everything in her medical arsenal. The fever had spiked once, sending him into delirious ramblings about bears and blood and men with guns. She'd sat with him through it, keeping him cool with damp cloths, whispering reassurances she wasn't sure he could hear. By the third morning, the fever broke. Colt woke clear-eyed and aware, his color better, his breathing easier. The wounds were still severe. His arm would take months to fully heal, and the chest injuries would scar badly, but he would live. You did it, he said, his voice still rough but stronger. You actually saved me. We saved you, Mara corrected. You're the one who crawled half a mile with a shredded chest and broken leg. I just cleaned up the mess. Just. He shook his head slightly. Nothing just about it. You're a miracle worker. I'm a competent nurse with adequate supplies. But she smiled as she said it. Over the past 3 days, they'd talked when Colt had the strength. He'd told her about his life on the mountain, 20 years of trapping and hunting, of learning the land's rhythms and secrets. He'd come west after the war, looking for space to breathe, somewhere the ghosts couldn't follow. He'd found peace in isolation, until Reeves started circling his land like a vulture. The timber companies want it, Colt had explained during one of their longer conversations. There's old growth pine on the northern slope worth a fortune. And the water rights. There's a natural spring that feeds 3 creeks. Control that, you control irrigation for half the valley. Why don't you sell? Mara had asked. If it's causing this much trouble. Because it's mine. Simple. Final. I built my life here. Every log in this cabin I cut and hauled myself. Every trap line I walked and set. This land isn't just property, it's proof I exist. Mara understood that more than he knew. Now, watching him sit up carefully against the pillows, she felt a strange reluctance to leave. The storm had passed. The trail would be navigable by afternoon. She should go back to town, report what happened, get help. But what help? Who would believe them? You're thinking loud, Colt said. What? Your face. You're thinking so hard I can practically hear it. He gestured to the chair beside the bed. Sit. Tell me. Mara sat. We need to figure out what happens next. You go back to town. I stay here and heal. Simple. It's not simple, and you know it. She leaned forward. If Reeves really did this, he's not going to stop. You said yourself he's been trying to get this land for months. An attempted murder isn't going to make him give up. It's going to make him more desperate. So what do you suggest? We need proof. Evidence. Something concrete we can take to the territorial marshal. Colt was quiet for a moment. The whistles I heard, they came from the North Ridge. If someone was up there, they might have left tracks, equipment. Bears don't hunt in groups, and they don't respond to calls. If we can prove humans were involved, then it wasn't an animal attack. It was assault with intent to kill. Attempted murder, Colt corrected. I'm still breathing, thanks to luck and stubbornness. And you. Their eyes met, held. Mara looked away first, uncomfortable with the warmth spreading through her chest. She wasn't a girl anymore. She knew better than to mistake gratitude for anything deeper. Colt was vulnerable, injured, grateful for her help. That was all. That had to be all. I'll check the ridge before I head back, she said, standing. If there's anything to find, I'll find it. You're not going alone. You can barely sit up. Then help me stand. Absolutely not. You'll tear your stitches and— Mara. His voice was firm. This is my fight. My land. If there's evidence up there, I should be the one to find it. In 3 days, you'll be stronger. 3 days is enough time for Reeves to clean up any evidence. Hell, 3 days is enough time for him to come back here and finish what he started. Colt gripped the bed frame, trying to lever himself up. His face went white with pain. I need to move. Need to be ready. Mara watched him struggle, jaw clenched, sweat breaking across his forehead. Pride. Stubbornness. The same traits that had kept him alive out here for 20 years. The same traits that might kill him now. One day, she said finally, you rest one more full day. Let the stitches set. Then we'll check your mobility. If, and only if, you can move without reopening the wounds, we'll go to the ridge together. Colt stopped struggling, looking at her with surprise. Together? You think I'm letting you hobble around alone? You'll be face down in the snow within 10 minutes. She crossed her arms. One day. That's my offer. Take it or I tie you to that bed. A slow smile spread across his face. You're bossy when you're being medical. I'm bossy when people are being stupid. But she smiled back. One day, Colt. Promise me. I promise. Good. She moved to the window, looking out at the fresh snow. The world was brilliant white, pristine and deadly beautiful. I'll hunt firewood and check the traps. You rest and let your body heal. Yes, ma'am. Mara spent the rest of the day working. She'd always been comfortable with physical labor. Her size gave her strength the delicate town women lacked. She hauled logs, split kindling, cleared snow from the stable roof. The work felt good, honest, real in a way her life in Black Hollow never had. That evening, she made a proper dinner from Colt's supplies, venison stew with wild onions and preserved carrots. They ate in comfortable silence, the fire crackling between them. Tell me about Black Hollow, Colt said eventually. What's it like living there? Mara considered her answer. Small, predictable, everyone knows everyone's business except mine because nobody's interested. I'm interested. She looked up, startled. You rode through a blizzard to save a stranger, Colt continued. That's not normal. So either you're crazy or there's more to you than Black Hollow sees. Maybe I am crazy. No, you're something else entirely. He set down his bowl. The town treating you bad? Not bad. Just invisible. Mara stared into her stew. I'm the helpful nurse, the one you call when someone's sick but don't invite to social gatherings. I take care of everyone's children, but nobody thinks I should have my own. I'm useful. Forgettable. A tool, not a person. That's their failing, not yours. Easy to say. Harder to live. I know. Colt's voice was quiet. I lived in town for 2 years after the war. Worked at the lumber mill. Tried to be normal. But people looked at me like I was broken, damaged, the crazy war veteran. After a while, their eyes made it true. So you came here. So I came here. Built walls of trees and mountains instead of people. Thought I was protecting myself. He laughed softly, without humor. Look how that turned out. You're alive, that's what matters. Because of you. There it was again. That weight in his words, that intensity in his eyes. Mara felt it pulling at something deep inside her, something she'd buried years ago under layers of disappointment and resignation. We should sleep, she said abruptly, standing. Tomorrow's going to be difficult. If Colt noticed her retreat, he didn't comment. He just nodded and settled back against the pillows, his face tight with pain he was trying to hide. Mara banked the fire and lay down on the bedroll she'd made on the floor. Outside, an owl called through the darkness. Inside, Colt's breathing eventually evened into sleep. But Mara stayed awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, wondering what the hell she was doing. She'd come here to save a life. Now she was involved in something far more dangerous. A conspiracy, possibly murder, definitely corruption at the highest levels of local law enforcement. Going back to town meant facing Reeves. Staying meant, what? Hiding on the mountain forever? Neither option felt right. But lying in the dark, listening to Colt breathe, Mara realized something that should have terrified her but somehow didn't. For the first time in her entire life, she wasn't invisible. Someone saw her, really saw her, and that changed everything. Morning came with pale light filtering through the cabin's single window. Mara woke to find Colt already awake, staring at the ceiling with the kind of stillness that meant he'd been thinking for hours. How long have you been up? She asked, sitting up and rubbing her neck. The floor hadn't gotten any softer overnight. Since before dawn. Heard something moving outside. Mara was on her feet instantly, moving to the window. What kind of something? Deer, probably. Maybe elk. Colt shifted in the bed, testing his mobility. Or maybe nothing. Fever dreams don't stop just because the fever breaks. She watched the tree line for a long moment, seeing nothing but pristine snow and skeletal branches. Still, her shoulders stayed tight. Out here, every sound mattered. Every shadow could be a threat. How's the pain? She asked, turning back to him. Bad. At least he was honest. But I can move. That's what counts. Mara checked his bandages, relieved to find no fresh bleeding. The chest wounds looked better, angry and red, but no signs of renewed infection. The arm was more concerning. The flesh was deeply bruised, swollen tight against the wrappings. This is going to take months to heal properly, she said. You won't have full use of it for a long time, maybe never. I've got another arm. Colt? I know. His voice was calm, resigned. I'm not stupid. I know what I lost, but I'm alive to lose it, and that's more than I expected 4 days ago. Mara finished rewrapping the bandages in silence. His acceptance bothered her more than anger would have, like he'd already written off parts of himself, calculating what he could afford to sacrifice. She knew that math. She'd been doing it her whole life. We should eat before we go, she said finally. You'll need your strength. They ate cold venison and hard bread. Neither of them wanted to take the time for cooking. The food sat heavy in Mara's stomach, but she forced it down anyway. If they were really going up to the ridge, she'd need the energy. Getting Colt dressed took 20 minutes and left him gray-faced and sweating. The broken leg made everything harder. Mara had fashioned a rough crutch from a branch and a crosspiece of firewood, wrapped where it met his armpit to prevent chafing. He leaned on it heavily, his jaw clenched so tight she could see the muscles jumping. Last chance to stay here and rest, she offered. Not taking it. Stubborn jackass. Bossy nurse. Despite everything, Mara smiled. They stepped outside into cold so sharp it hurt to breathe. The sky was pale blue, cloudless, the kind of deceptive beauty that promised frozen death to anyone who underestimated it. Snow came up to Mara's knees in places, higher where it had drifted against rocks and fallen timber. Colt moved like an old man, each step deliberate and painful. His crutch sank deep into the snow, making every movement a battle. After 50 yards, he had to stop, breathing hard. Maybe we should, Mara started. No. He pushed forward again. I can do this. The ridge was a quarter-mile north of the cabin, following a game trail that wound through dense pine. Under normal circumstances, it would have been an easy walk. Now, with Colt's injuries and the deep snow, it felt endless. Mara led the way, breaking trail, looking back every few steps to make sure Colt was still upright. His face had gone from gray to chalk white, but he kept moving, pride or stupidity. She still couldn't tell which. Tell me about the attack, she said, partly to distract him from the pain. Where exactly were you when it happened? Checking trap lines. Northern Loop. He paused to catch his breath, gesturing vaguely ahead. About 100 yards past the ridge. I heard something moving in the brush. Thought it was a fox or maybe a young deer. Then the whistles started. What kind of whistles? High, sharp. 2 different patterns, coming from 2 different directions. Colt's eyes were distant, remembering. I'd heard them before. Hunters use them to drive game, but there's no hunting this time of year. Season's closed. So someone was using hunting calls to drive something toward you. That's when I saw the bear. Massive grizzly, female, acting wrong, agitated, scared. Bears don't hunt humans, they avoid us. But this one came straight at me like I'd threatened her cubs. Was she protecting a den? Wrong time of year. They den in deep winter, not fall. Colt stumbled slightly, caught himself on the crutch. And she broke off the attack after tearing me up. Just stopped and ran, like whatever was driving her had stopped too. Mara filed that away, her mind working through the implications. A coordinated attack meant at least 2 people. Planning, premeditation. This wasn't opportunistic violence. It was calculated murder dressed up as frontier misfortune. They reached the ridge and stopped. The view was stunning, miles of wilderness stretching in every direction, peaks sharp against the winter sky, valleys filled with snow and shadow, beautiful and merciless. Where? Mara asked. Colt pointed to a clearing below them. maybe 100 yards down the slope. There. That's where she hit me. Mara could see disturbed snow even from this distance, a wide swath of destruction where the attack had happened, then a long drag mark leading toward the cabin, the path Colt had crawled. Her stomach turned thinking about it. "Stay here," she said. "Rest. I'll check the area where the whistles came from. I'm coming with you. Colt, you can barely stand. I'm coming." His voice held an edge she hadn't heard before. Not anger exactly, determination sharpened by pain. "This is my land, my fight. I need to see it myself." Mara wanted to argue, but she recognized that tone. She'd used it herself when she'd insisted on riding into the storm. Some things you had to do yourself, consequences be damned. "Fine, but if you fall, I'm leaving you there." "Fair enough." They worked their way around the ridge, Mara supporting Colt when the terrain got rough. Snow had covered most tracks, but not all. Near a cluster of boulders on the northern face, Mara found something that made her stop. Boot prints. Recent ones, partially filled but still distinct. "Someone was here," she said, kneeling to examine them closer. "Two people. See, different sizes." Colt leaned against a boulder, studying the prints. 3 days ago, maybe 4. Right timeline for the attack. Mara followed the tracks, brushing away fresh snow. They led to a flat rock that would have provided a perfect vantage point over the clearing below. And there, wedged in a crack in the stone, she found it. A wooden whistle. It was crude but functional, the kind trappers and hunters made from hollow branches. She held it up to the light, examining it carefully. "This isn't yours?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Never used one. Don't need calls for my traps." Mara pocketed the whistle and kept searching. 10 feet away, she found something better. A leather glove, expensive quality, with initials burned into the wrist strap. DR. She held it up for Colt to see. His face went hard. "Dalton Reeves." "Could be someone else with those initials," Mara said, but her voice lacked conviction. "In Black Hollow? Name another DR in town." She couldn't. Reeves was the only one. They searched for another 20 minutes but found nothing else. The glove and whistle were damning, but would they be enough? A good lawyer could argue they'd been planted, that anyone could have carved those initials, that the sheriff's gloves could have been lost or stolen. They needed more. "We should check the other position," Colt said. "You said there were whistles from 2 directions." "You need to rest. You're shaking." "I'm fine." "You're not fine. You're barely conscious." Mara took his arm, feeling the tremors running through him. "We're going back to the cabin, now." For once, he didn't argue. The return trip took twice as long. Colt's strength was failing fast, his movements getting sluggish and uncoordinated. Mara had to support most of his weight for the last 100 yards. By the time they reached the cabin, he was delirious again, mumbling about bears and blood and men in the trees. She got him inside, back into bed, and checked his wounds. One of the chest stitches had torn slightly, oozing fresh blood. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to be concerning. "Stupid," she muttered, cleaning and restitching the wound. "Stupid, stubborn, reckless. Takes one to know one," Colt mumbled, his eyes half closed. "Shut up and hold still." She got him settled, forced water down his throat, and covered him with every fur and blanket in the cabin. His body was fighting hard now. Healing took enormous energy, and he'd just spent what little reserve he had climbing a mountain with a broken leg and torn chest. Mara sat by the fire, turning the glove over in her hands. The leather was good quality, well made, expensive, the kind of thing a man would notice if he lost it, which meant Reeves either didn't know he'd lost it or he'd already written it off as irretrievable in the deep snow. Either way, it was evidence. But evidence of what exactly? That Reeves had been on the ridge? He could claim he was hunting, that he dropped the glove days or weeks before the attack. Without witnesses, without proof of coordination, it was just a glove in the woods. They needed more. Testimony. Documentation. Something that couldn't be explained away. Mara was still thinking when she heard horses. The sound was distant but distinct. Multiple animals moving through snow coming from the south, from the direction of town. She moved to the window and looked out, her heart hammering. Through the trees she could see movement, riders, at least 4, maybe more. "Colt," she said quietly, "we have company." He struggled to sit up, reaching instinctively for something that wasn't there. My rifle. Is where? Corner. Behind the door. Mara found the weapon, a heavy Winchester well-maintained despite years of use. She'd fired guns before, helping Doc Patterson put down sick animals, but never at a person. The weight felt foreign in her hands. The riders were closer now. She could make out details. 4 men, bundled against the cold, led by someone on a large bay horse. Sheriff Dalton Reeves. "It's him," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "He brought men." "How many?" 4 total. Reeves plus 3 deputies. Colt swore softly. "Can't fight 4 men, not like this." "We're not fighting anyone." Mara set the rifle aside and moved to the door. "Let me handle this." "Mara, trust me." She stepped outside before he could argue, pulling the door shut behind her. The cold hit her face like a slap, but she barely noticed. All her attention was on the approaching riders. Reeves saw her and pulled up short, surprise flickering across his face before he schooled it into concern. "Miss Whitaker," he called, dismounting. "Thank the Lord you're alive. The whole town's been worried sick." "I'm fine, Sheriff." Mara stood in front of the cabin door, arms crossed. "As you can see. When you didn't return after the storm, we feared the worst." Reeves approached slowly, his 3 deputies hanging back. "A woman alone in a blizzard? It's a miracle you survived." "I wasn't alone. I was treating a patient." "Ah, yes, the trapper." Reeves glanced at the cabin. "How is Mr. Mercer?" "Alive. Recovering." "Is he now?" Something shifted in the sheriff's expression. "That's surprising. We heard the bear attack was quite severe." "It was, but I'm a good nurse." They stood 10 feet apart, measuring each other. Reeves was tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man used to physical intimidation working in his favor. But Mara had spent 3 days hauling firewood and supporting a grown man through mountain terrain. She wasn't intimidated. "Well, that's wonderful news," Reeves said, his smile returning. "I'm sure Mr. Mercer is grateful for your help. But now it's time to come home, Miss Whitaker. Town needs its nurse." "I'm needed here." "For how long? Days? Weeks?" The sheriff's voice hardened slightly. "You can't stay on the mountain forever, and Mr. Mercer can't expect you to sacrifice your life for his convenience." "It's not about convenience. It's about keeping a patient alive." "Admirable. Truly." Reeves took another step closer. "But I'm afraid I can't allow it. As sheriff, I'm responsible for the safety of everyone in this territory. That includes you. And staying here, alone with a man you barely know, in isolated conditions, well, that's just not proper." There it was. The real concern. Not her safety, but her propriety. The suggestion that something inappropriate might be happening in this cabin, that her reputation was at risk. Mara felt rage bloom hot in her chest. "My reputation is my own concern," she said coldly. "Not yours." "Perhaps. But when you return to town, people will talk. They'll ask questions. And if I allowed you to stay here without intervention, they'd blame me for failing in my duty." Reeves spread his hands, all reasonable authority. "I'm trying to protect you, Miss Whitaker, from gossip as much as danger." "How thoughtful." "I mean it. Come back with us now. Mr. Mercer will be fine on his own. He's survived this long, hasn't he? And if he needs further medical attention, Doc Patterson can ride out once the trails are clearer. Doc Patterson is drunk more often than sober." "Now that's not fair." "It's true, and you know it." Mara held her ground. "Colt Mercer needs consistent care for at least another week. I'm providing it. End of discussion." Reeves' mask of concern slipped slightly. "I'm afraid it's not that simple. As sheriff, you have no authority to force me to leave. I'm here voluntarily, treating a patient who would die without help. Unless you're planning to arrest me for practicing medicine?" "Of course not. But then we're done here." Mara turned toward the cabin door. "Miss Whitaker." Reeves's voice cracked like a whip. "I'm trying to be reasonable. Don't make this difficult." She paused, looking back at him. "Difficult how?" The sheriff's face was cold now, all pretense of concern gone. "There are rules about practicing medicine without a license, about unauthorized treatment of patients. Doc Patterson has the legal authority in this territory, not you. If I filed a complaint with the Territorial Medical Board, then file it." Mara's heart raced, but her voice stayed level. "I'm sure they'd be interested to hear how you tried to prevent medical care from reaching a dying man. how you held a town meeting specifically to discourage rescue, how you're now threatening the only person who had the courage to help. Reeves went very still. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Your word against mine, and I'm the sheriff. For now, the threat hung in the air between them. Behind Reeves, the three deputies shifted uncomfortably. They'd heard everything. They were witnesses to this entire exchange. Reeves realized it too. His jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. I don't think so. That man in there, he pointed at the cabin, is dangerous, unstable. Everyone knows it. He lives alone on the mountain because he can't function in civilized society. And now you're defending him, risking everything for him? He's a patient who needs care. That's all that matters. Is it? Reeves leaned closer, lowering his voice so the deputies couldn't hear. Or is there something else going on here? Something you're not admitting? Mara felt her face flush, but she didn't back down. Say what you mean, Sheriff. I think you're lonely. I think you saw a chance to play hero, to feel important for once, and you took it without thinking about the consequences. His voice was almost gentle now, patronizing. I understand. Really, I do. But this fantasy has to end. He doesn't care about you. He's using you. And when you're not useful anymore, he'll discard you like everyone else has. The words hit harder than they should have. They echoed thoughts Mara had whispered to herself in dark moments. That she was just a convenience, that no one could actually want her, that her value began and ended with her usefulness. But then she thought about Colt's voice in the darkness. You're exactly what you need to be. You don't know anything about him, she said quietly. Or me. I know enough. I know he's filled your head with lies about me, about the attack, about why he's really hiding up here. Reeves's eyes narrowed. Did he tell you I'm trying to steal his land? That I orchestrated the bear attack? Mara's silence was answer enough. Reeves laughed, the sound harsh and bitter. He's paranoid, Miss Whitaker. Damaged from the war? He sees conspiracies everywhere, and now he's dragged you into his delusions. Is that your official statement? It's the truth. Then you won't mind if I find evidence to the contrary. Something dangerous flickered across the sheriff's face. What evidence? Mara reached into her pocket and pulled out the glove, holding it up so the initials caught the light. This. Found it on the ridge overlooking the place where Colt was attacked. Funny place for a sheriff to lose his glove, don't you think? Reeves went very pale. Where did you... The ridge, along with boot prints and a hunter's whistle. Mara kept her voice calm, factual. Strange things to find in a place where a man was supposedly attacked by a random bear. That proves nothing. Maybe not, but it's interesting. And I bet the territorial marshal will find it interesting too. You're making a very serious mistake. Reeves's voice was low, dangerous. Accusing a law enforcement officer of a crime, that's not something you walk back from. I'm not accusing anyone. I'm just reporting what I found. Based on the word of a paranoid hermit. Based on physical evidence. They stared at each other, the tension crackling like electricity. Behind Reeves, the deputies looked increasingly uncomfortable. This had gone far beyond a simple wellness check. Finally, Reeves stepped back. Keep the glove. Show it to whoever you want. But know this. When you come down from this mountain, you won't find the welcome you're expecting. The town takes care of its own, and I've been serving Black Hollow for 15 years. Who do you think they'll believe? Me or the fat spinster nurse who's been playing house with the crazy mountain man? The words were meant to wound, and they did. But Mara had spent her whole life absorbing that kind of casual cruelty. She'd built up calluses. I guess we'll find out, she said. Reeves mounted his horse in one smooth motion. You have 3 days. After that, if you're not back in town, I'll file formal charges. Practicing medicine without authority, obstruction of justice, conspiracy to make false accusations against a peace officer. You'll lose everything. I don't have anything to lose. Everyone has something to lose, Miss Whitaker. Reeves gathered his reins. Even you. He wheeled his horse and rode off, the 3 deputies following. They didn't look back. Mara stood in the snow until they disappeared into the trees, her hands shaking with adrenaline and anger. Only when she was certain they were gone did she allow herself to breathe. The cabin door opened behind her. That went well, Colt said dryly. He was leaning heavily against the doorframe, his face gray. You should be in bed. Couldn't hear through the walls, needed to know what was happening. He threatened me. Us. Said he'd file charges if I don't come back in 3 days. Then you should go. Mara turned to face him. What? You should go back to town. Now. Before this gets worse. Colt's voice was tired but firm. I can manage alone. You've done more than enough. Are you serious right now? Yes. After everything, the evidence, the threats, the fact that he basically admitted nothing, Colt interrupted. He's smart, careful. Everything he said can be twisted, explained away. But if you stay, if you fight him, he'll destroy you. Let him try. Mara, no. She moved toward him, anger giving her strength. No, I'm not running. I'm not giving up because some corrupt sheriff wants to protect his crimes. That's exactly what he's counting on, that I'll be scared enough to back down. You should be scared. I'm scared. Colt's eyes were intense despite the fever. He's dangerous. More dangerous than you realize. And if he's willing to kill me, he won't hesitate to hurt you too. Then we go to the marshal, together. We show him the evidence, we tell him everything, and we let the law handle it. The law? Colt laughed bitterly. The marshal's office is 3 days' ride away. You think Reeves will just let us waltz out of here with evidence against him? He'll have men watching the trails, waiting. So what do you suggest? Hide here forever? No. I suggest you go back to town like he wants. Play along. Act like you believe his lies. Then when things calm down, you quietly contact the marshal. Send a letter. Get help. And leave you alone up here? Injured? With Reeves knowing exactly where to find you? I've survived 20 years on this mountain. I can handle... You can't even stand without help. Mara's voice cracked with frustration. Stop acting like you're invincible. You're hurt, Colt, badly hurt. And Reeves knows it. The only thing keeping you alive right now is me being here. The only reason he didn't try something today is because he knows I'd be a witness. Colt was quiet for a long moment. So what do you want to do? I want to finish what we started. Find the rest of the evidence. Document everything. Build a case so solid that even a corrupt sheriff can't wriggle out of it. She stepped closer. And then I want to watch Dalton Reeves answer for what he did to you. That's a lot of wanting. I've spent my whole life not wanting anything, not letting myself want. It's exhausting. Mara met his eyes. I'm done being quiet, done being invisible. If I'm going to burn my life down, I might as well do it for something that matters. I matter? The question was soft, vulnerable. It caught Mara off guard. Yes, she said simply. You matter. Something shifted in Colt's expression. Surprise, maybe? Or something deeper. He reached out with his good hand, his fingers finding hers. Then we do this together, he said. But carefully. Reeves is smart, and he's got resources we don't have. We need to be smarter. Agreed. And you need to teach me how to move better with this leg. If we're going to search for more evidence, I can't be dead weight. You're not? I am. But I don't have to stay that way. He squeezed her hand gently. 3 days. That's what Reeves gave us. Let's use them. They spent the rest of the day planning. Colt described the land in detail. Every trail, every landmark, every place someone might hide to watch the cabin. Mara mapped it out on paper, creating a rough chart of the surrounding territory. The second whistle location should be southeast of the clearing, Colt explained. If the attack was coordinated, the two positions would need clear sight lines to communicate. They'd also need escape routes, places to hide horses, approaches that wouldn't be visible from the cabin. Here, Colt said, pointing to a spot on Mara's crude map. There's an old hunter's blind about 200 yards from where I was attacked. Perfect vantage point, hidden from below. If I was setting up an ambush, that's where I'd put my second man. Can you get there? With help? Maybe. It's rough terrain, though. And if we get caught out there, we won't get caught. You don't know that? No. But I know we can't sit here doing nothing while Reeves decides our fate. Mara studied the map, calculating distances and risks. Tomorrow morning. Early. Before anyone's up watching the trails. Colt nodded slowly. Tomorrow. That night, they ate in companionable silence. The cabin felt smaller somehow, more intimate. Mara caught herself watching Colt when she thought he wasn't looking. The way his hands moved despite the pain, the stubborn set of his jaw, the occasional flash of dry humor that surfaced when he forgot to be guarded. He caught her staring once and smiled. What? Nothing, just thinking. About? How strange this is. A week ago, I didn't know you existed. Now I'm planning to take down a corrupt sheriff and probably destroy my entire life in the process. You can still change your mind. I know. Mara poked at the fire with a stick. I don't want to. Why not? She considered the question seriously. Because for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm doing something that matters, not just going through the motions, not just being useful to people who don't really see me, actually mattering. You've always mattered. Not like this. Colt was quiet for a moment. The town really did a number on you, didn't it? Is that a question? An observation? He shifted position carefully, favoring his injuries. I know what it's like to be invisible. To have people look through you like you're not worth their attention, it makes you doubt yourself. Start believing the things they say about you. How did you stop? I left. Came up here where their opinions couldn't reach me. He smiled sadly. But that's just trading one kind of invisible for another. Nobody sees you if you hide where they can't look. So what's the answer? I don't know. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe we're all just fumbling around trying to figure out how to exist without apologizing for it. Mara laughed softly. That's depressing. Welcome to my world. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Outside, the wind picked up again, whistling through the trees. Inside, the cabin was warm and safe. For now. Mara? Colt's voice was quiet. Yeah? Thank you. For staying. For caring. For... He trailed off, searching for words. For seeing me. She looked at him across the firelight, this broken, stubborn, surprisingly gentle man who'd somehow become the center of her whole world in less than a week. You're welcome, she said, and meant it with everything she had. The riders came at dawn on the 5th day. Mara was outside checking the traps when she heard them. The distant thunder of hooves muffled by snow, the jingle of tack and weapons. She dropped the rabbit she'd been carrying and ran back to the cabin, her breath coming in sharp white bursts. Colt! She burst through the door. Someone's coming! He was already on his feet, or trying to be. The past 2 days had seen remarkable improvement. The infection had cleared, the fever was gone, and his natural strength was reasserting itself with stubborn determination. But standing still cost him, and Mara could see the tremor in his legs as he reached for the rifle mounted above the fireplace. How many? I don't know. I heard horses. Maybe 4 or 5. She moved to the window, peering through the frost-clouded glass. They're coming from the South Trail. That's the town route. Colt checked the rifle's load with practiced efficiency despite his damaged arm. Reeves. The name hung between them like smoke. They'd spent the past 2 days searching the North Ridge, finding exactly what Colt had suspected. Boot prints, the remains of a camp, broken branches where someone had constructed a blind. Most damning of all, they'd found a steel whistle, the kind trappers used to signal across distances. Bears didn't respond to whistles. Men did. The evidence was solid, enough to take to the territorial marshal, enough to bring charges. But first they had to survive long enough to deliver it. Get away from the window, Colt said quietly. His voice had changed, dropping into something flat and cold that made Mara's skin prickle. This was the war veteran talking now, the man who'd learned to kill before he learned to live. If shooting starts, you get down and stay down. Understand? I'm not hiding while... Mara. He looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes stopped her protest. Please, I've already got you in enough danger. Don't make me watch you die too. The riders emerged from the tree line before she could answer. Sheriff Dalton Reeves led them, sitting tall on a black gelding, his deputy flanking him on a gray mare. Behind them rode 3 men Mara didn't recognize, rough-looking types with the hard eyes of hired muscle. All of them were armed. Reeves reined in about 30 yards from the cabin, close enough to talk, far enough to avoid immediate rifle range. Smart. The man knew what he was doing. Colt Mercer! The sheriff's voice carried clearly in the cold air. I know you're in there. Come on out so we can talk like civilized men. Colt moved to the door but didn't open it. I'm listening. Miss Whitaker rode up here 5 days ago. Storm's been clear for 2 days now, and she hasn't come back. The town's worried about her. We came to make sure she's safe." Mara stepped up beside Colt, ignoring his warning glance. She pushed open the door and stood in the threshold. "I'm fine, Sheriff. Thank you for your concern." Reeves' expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Calculation. Adjustment. "Miss Whitaker, good to see you're alive. When you didn't return, we feared the worst. As you can see, I'm perfectly well. Mr. Mercer was injured but is recovering. I'll be returning to town soon." "Glad to hear it." Reeves shifted in his saddle. "Why don't you come down now? We'll escort you back safely. Colt here can manage on his own, I'm sure. Actually, Sheriff, I need to speak with you about Mr. Mercer's injuries." Reeves's smile tightened fractionally. "What about them?" "They weren't caused by a random bear attack." Mara kept her voice steady, professional. "We found evidence on the North Ridge, signs of human activity immediately before the attack. Someone deliberately drove that animal toward Mr. Mercer." The three hired men exchanged glances. The deputy's hand moved closer to his gun. Reeves just sat there, still smiling. "That's quite an accusation, Miss Whitaker. You sure the altitude hasn't affected your judgment?" "I'm sure of what we found. Boot prints, a camp, a signaling whistle." She paused. "This wasn't an accident. It was attempted murder." The words fell into silence. A crow called from somewhere in the trees. One of the horses stamped and snorted. "Well now," Reeves said slowly, "that's a serious claim. Very serious. You got proof of this?" "We have the whistle, and we documented the site, enough to bring to the territorial marshal." "Is that right?" The sheriff's smile finally faded. "And you think the marshal's going to believe the word of a mountain hermit and a—" He paused, letting his eyes run over Mara's body with deliberate contempt. "A desperate woman looking for purpose?" The insult landed like a slap. Mara felt Colt tense beside her, but she held up a hand, stopping him. "I think the marshal will believe the physical evidence," she said, "which is why we'll be delivering it personally." "No, you won't." The pretense dropped away. Reeves' face went hard, all false civility evaporating. "You're going to come down here right now, Miss Whitaker, and Colt's going to hand over whatever you think you found. Then we're all going to ride back to town and forget this foolishness ever happened. And if we refuse, then I'll have to assume you're being held against your will. That Colt here kidnapped a respectable woman from town. That gives me legal authority to extract you by force." He gestured to the men behind him. "These gentlemen are deputized for the purpose. We can do this easy, or we can do this hard. Your choice." Mara's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment when Reeves dropped the mask completely. No more games, no more pretense, just raw power and the threat of violence. "I'm not being held against my will," she said. "I came here voluntarily, and I'm staying voluntarily. You have no legal grounds to—" "I have all the grounds I need." Reeves's hand moved to his gun. "Last chance, Miss Whitaker. Come down now." "She's not going anywhere." Colt's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He stepped fully into the doorway, rifle held across his chest. His face was pale from standing, and Mara could see fresh blood seeping through the bandages on his arm where the movement had stressed the healing wounds. But his hands were steady. "This is my property, Reeves. You're trespassing. Leave now or I'll defend my land." The sheriff laughed, a sharp, ugly sound. "You're going to defend it? Look at you. You can barely stand. You think you can take all 5 of us?" "No." Colt's finger moved to the trigger. "But I can take you. And I promise, Sheriff, you'll be the first one down." The standoff crystallized. 5 armed men against 2 people, one of them barely recovered from near-fatal injuries. The math was simple, brutal. But Reeves hesitated, because Colt wasn't bluffing. The rifle was aimed directly at the sheriff's chest, and the distance was short enough that even a wounded man couldn't miss. Reeves could give the order to attack, but he'd die in the process. And for the first time, Mara saw fear flicker across the sheriff's face. "You're making a mistake," Reeves said. His voice had lost its commanding tone, turning defensive. "All of you, the town won't stand for this. Attacking a lawman, but this is exactly what you did to me." Colt took a careful step forward. "Difference is, I've got witnesses now, and evidence, and I'm still breathing, despite your best efforts. I don't know what you think happened, but I know exactly what happened. You wanted my land I wouldn't sell, so you hired men to stage a bear attack and leave me for dead. Would have worked too if Mara hadn't ridden up here. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. That must have surprised you. The fat nurse everyone ignores, the one nobody thinks is capable of anything. She ruined your whole plan. Reeves's jaw tightened. You can't prove any of that. I can prove enough. And when the marshal investigates, he's going to find more. Your hired men, your land deals, your connections to the timber companies. It's all going to come out, Dalton, all of it. For a long moment, nobody moved. The horses shifted and blew steam. The hired guns looked increasingly uncomfortable, probably calculating whether whatever Reeves was paying them was worth getting shot over. Then the deputy cleared his throat. Sheriff, he said quietly, maybe we should head back. Think this through proper. Reeves turned on him. Shut up, Thomas. I'm just saying, if there's evidence like they claim, forcing the issue now might eat. I said shut up. The sheriff's control was cracking. You work for me. You do what I tell you. Deputy Thomas went quiet, but his hand moved away from his gun. That small gesture spoke volumes. Reeves noticed. His eyes darted between his men, reading the room, calculating odds. Whatever he saw there, it wasn't support. This isn't over, he said finally, pointing at Colt. You think you can accuse me and just walk away? This is my territory, my town. Nobody crosses Dalton Reeves and lives to... The gunshot cracked across the clearing. Everyone froze. For a horrible second, Mara thought Colt had fired, that the standoff had erupted into violence. But Colt's rifle was still pointed at Reeves, unfired. The shot had come from behind the sheriff. One of the hired men lowered his pistol, his face twisted with rage. Had enough of your threats, Reeves. You said this was a simple job, didn't say nothing about murdering citizens. Put that gun down, Reeves ordered, but his voice shook. No. The man spat into the snow. I hired on for security work, not conspiracy to murder. And I ain't getting hanged because you got greedy. The other two hired men nodded agreement. One of them actually turned his horse around, heading back toward the trail. You're all making a huge mistake, Reeves said, but his authority was evaporating. I'll see you all You'll see us what? Deputy Thomas cut him off. Arrested? For not helping you commit murder? Sheriff, I've been looking the other way on a lot of your dealings, but this is different. This is attempted murder. I can't be part of this. Thomas, I quit. The deputy unpinned his badge and dropped it in the snow. As of right now, I'm done. And I'm going to the territorial marshal with everything I know. Reeves stared at the badge lying in the white snow like it was a snake. His face had gone red, veins standing out on his forehead. You ungrateful, all of you. I made you. I gave you jobs when nobody else would hire you. And this is how you repay me? Nobody answered. The hired men were already riding away. Deputy Thomas followed them, not looking back. That left Reeves alone, sitting on his horse 30 yards from a man who had every reason to shoot him. Looks like your supports abandoned you, Colt said quietly. Might want to think about doing the same to this plan of yours. For a moment, Mara thought Reeves might actually draw his gun, might force a shootout he couldn't win just to salvage his pride. His hand hovered near his holster, trembling with rage. But then he yanked his horse's head around and kicked it into a gallop, fleeing back down the trail without another word. The silence after he left felt massive. Colt lowered the rifle slowly, and Mara saw his hand shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. He took 2 steps back toward the cabin, then his legs gave out. She caught him before he hit the ground. I'm okay, he muttered, but blood was spreading across his bandages. Just stood too long. You tore your stitches, you stubborn idiot. Mara hauled him back inside, surprisingly strong in her panic. Sit, don't move. She worked quickly, cutting away the ruined bandages, assessing the damage. 3 stitches had torn in his arm, and one of the chest wounds had reopened partially. Nothing catastrophic, but it set back his healing by days. Worth it, Colt said through gritted teeth as she cleaned the wounds. Did you see his face when his own men turned on him? I saw you almost get yourself killed. Mara's hands moved with automatic precision, but her voice shook. What if they'd started shooting? What if... They didn't. We're alive, and now we've got witnesses who'll testify against Reeves. If they actually go to the marshal. They could just run. Thomas won't run. He's a good man, just caught in a bad situation, and those hired guns know Reeves is finished. They'll save themselves by testifying. Colt winced as she began restitching. We won. This doesn't feel like winning. Mara tied off the last suture with more force than necessary. Reeves is still out there. He's cornered now, which makes him more dangerous, and the whole town just heard him accuse you of kidnapping me. Did you feel kidnapped? That's not the point. The point is, she stopped, realizing what she was about to say. The point is, I'm scared. Scared of what happens next. Scared of going back to town. Scared of what I feel when I look at you. What? Colt prompted gently. The point is, we need a plan. Mara finished wrapping the fresh bandages. We can't stay here. Reeves knows where you live. Even if his men abandon him, he could hire new ones. Or come back alone. Desperate men do desperate things. So we go to the marshal ourselves. It's a 3-day ride in good weather. You're in no condition to... Then you go without me. Mara looked at him sharply. Absolutely not. Mara, be reasonable. I'm slowing you down. If you left now, you could make it to the territorial office and... I'm not leaving you. The words came out harder than she intended. Don't ask me to do that. They stared at each other. The fire crackled. Outside, a branch cracked under the weight of accumulated snow. Why not? Colt asked quietly. You've done your job. I'm alive. The evidence is documented. You could take it to the marshal and be the hero. Why stay? Because I don't want to be invisible anymore. Because when I'm here with you, I feel like I matter. Because going back to Black Hollow means going back to being nobody. But she didn't say any of that. Instead, she stood and moved to the window, looking out at the mountain landscape. We leave together, she said. Tomorrow morning. We'll take it slow. Stop when you need to rest. But we're both going to that marshal's office. Mara, that's final. She turned to face him. And if you argue with me, I'll sedate you with laudanum and drag you there myself. Colt smiled despite himself. You would too, wouldn't you? Without hesitation. All right then. We leave together. He shifted on the bed, trying to find a position that didn't stress his injuries. But we need to talk about what happens when we get back to town. What do you mean? Reeves will have told his version of events by now. That I kidnapped you, held you hostage, probably worse. The town's going to believe him. He's the sheriff, I'm the crazy hermit. Even with testimony from Thomas and the others, there'll be doubt. Mara hadn't considered that. In the isolation of the cabin, it had been easy to forget about Black Hollow's social dynamics, the way gossip spread like wildfire, the way people believed what they wanted to believe. So we tell them the truth, she said. And you think they'll believe you? The woman everyone ignores? Colt's voice was gentle but honest. Mara, they're going to say I manipulated you, that you're too naive or desperate to see you're being used. They'll tear you apart. Let them try. I'm serious. Going back there with me means social suicide. Every friend you have, every patient who trusted you, they'll turn their backs. You'll be the woman who sided with the man who attacked their sheriff. I don't care. You should care. This is your home, your life. Don't throw it away for what? She crossed her arms. For the truth? For doing what's right? For refusing to let a corrupt man get away with attempted murder? For me, Colt said quietly. Don't throw it away for me. The words hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Mara felt her heart hammering. They were edging towards something neither of them had named yet, something that had been growing in the silence of the cabin, in the shared danger, in the way he looked at her like she was worth seeing. Maybe, she said slowly, maybe I'm not throwing anything away. Maybe I'm choosing something better. There's nothing better about being an outcast. You don't know that. You've never been what I was in that town. She moved back to sit beside the bed. Colt, I've spent my whole life being useful, being helpful, being whatever other people needed me to be. And all it got me was a lifetime of being overlooked. That's not... It is. You know it is. You saw it yourself when you asked what I looked like. I've been defined by my body, by my usefulness, by what I can do for other people. Never by who I am. She took a breath. But here, with you, I'm not useful. I'm necessary. There's a difference. Colt reached out, taking her hand with his good one. You're more than necessary. You're remarkable. I'm stubborn and reckless and apparently terrible at self-preservation. You're brave. You're skilled. You're the strongest person I've ever met. His thumb traced circles on her palm. And I don't want you to sacrifice everything for me. But I also don't want to let you go. There it was. The thing neither of them had said. Mara looked at their joined hands, her large, capable fingers intertwined with his scarred, rough ones. Nothing about this made sense. She'd known this man for less than a week. Most of that time he'd been delirious with fever or recovering from massive trauma. They had no foundation for what she was feeling, no rational basis for the way her heart leaped when he smiled. And yet, "So don't," she said. "Don't let me go." Colt's eyes searched her face. "You understand what you're saying? If we do this, if we go back to town together, present our evidence, stand against Reeves, there's no going back. Your reputation, your position, everything you've built there, was built on being invisible. I don't want that anymore." Mara squeezed his hand. "I want to be seen and you see me." "I do. I see you, Mara, and you're—" He stopped, struggling with words. "You're everything I didn't know I needed." They sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the decision settling around them. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. Tomorrow they would ride down the mountain into whatever storm waited. But tonight, in this cabin, they were safe. Mara stood, still holding his hand. "You need to rest. We leave at dawn." "Wait." Colt tugged her back gently. "When this is over, when we've dealt with Reeves and given our testimony, what then?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you go back to Black Hollow, resume your nursing work, try to rebuild your life there?" He paused. "Or is there another option?" Mara's breath caught. "What kind of option?" "The kind where you don't go back, where you stay here." He rushed on before she could respond. "I know it's crazy. I know we barely know each other, but this cabin, this mountain, it could be a home. For both of us. You said yourself the town never valued you. Why go back to that?" "Colt, you're a skilled nurse. There are settlers all over these mountains, families who need medical care and can't get to town. You could help them. Build a practice here, and I could—" He stopped, suddenly uncertain. "I could be here. With you. If you wanted." Mara sat back down slowly. The proposal was insane. Impractical. She'd be giving up everything familiar for a life of isolation and hardship. The winters were brutal this high up. Medical supplies would be hard to obtain. She'd be cutting herself off from civilization. "Yes," she said. Colt blinked. "Yes?" "Yes." Mara smiled, feeling something unlock in her chest. "Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I want to build something here. Yes to all of it. You're sure, because if you need time to think, I've spent 34 years thinking, calculating, being reasonable and careful and appropriate." She leaned forward, her face close to his. "I'm done thinking. For once in my life, I'm just going to do what feels right. And this feels right? Terrifyingly right." Colt pulled her closer with his good arm, and she went, careful not to jar his injuries. His forehead rested against hers, and she could feel his breath warm against her skin. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted quietly. "Haven't been close to anyone in 20 years. Might be terrible at it." "I've never been close to anyone at all. We'll figure it out together." "Together," he smiled. "I like the sound of that." They stayed like that as darkness fell. Two people who'd spent their lives alone, choosing each other in the face of impossible odds. It wasn't practical. It wasn't smart. But it was real. And it was theirs. And that was enough. Later, as Mara banked the fire and prepared for bed, Colt spoke from the darkness. "Tomorrow's going to be hard." "I know. The town might turn on you completely. Reeves might try something desperate. We could lose everything." "I know that too." She settled onto her bedroll. "But we'll face it together. That's what matters." "You're not scared?" Mara considered the question honestly. "I'm terrified, but I'm also more alive than I've ever been. I'll take terrified and alive over safe and invisible any day." Colt's soft laugh drifted through the cabin. "You're something else, Mara Whitaker." "So are you, Colt Mercer." Sleep came slowly, but when it did, Mara dreamed not of the confrontation ahead, but of a future neither of them had dared imagine. A cabin transformed into a healing place. Families arriving with sick children and injured workers. A life built from purpose instead of obligation. And through it all, a man who saw her not as useful, but as irreplaceable. When dawn came, cold and clear, they prepared to face whatever waited below. But they prepared together, and somehow that made all the difference. They were 3 miles from the cabin when the first shot rang out. The bullet cracked past Mara's head, close enough that she felt the air displacement, heard the angry wasp buzz of lead moving too fast. Dolly reared, nearly throwing her, and Mara grabbed the saddle horn with both hands while her medical bag swung wildly against her hip. "Down!" Colt's voice cut through her panic. "Get off the horse and find cover!" She slid from the saddle ungracefully, hitting the snow hard enough to knock the wind from her lungs. Another shot kicked up ice 2 feet from her face. The horses bolted, crashing through the underbrush in opposite directions, and suddenly Mara was alone in the open with bullets flying and no idea which direction they were coming from. A hand grabbed her coat and yanked her sideways. Colt hauled her behind a fallen log, his face gray with pain from the exertion. They pressed themselves flat as 2 more shots splintered wood above their heads. "How many?" Mara gasped. "Don't know. At least 2 shooters, different positions." Colt had his rifle out, scanning the tree line. Blood was already seeping through his coat where the violent movement had stressed his wounds. "They were waiting for us." "Reeves. Has to be. Nobody else knows we're coming down today." Another shot punched through the log, showering them with frozen splinters. Mara flinched, her heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. She'd never been shot at before. The clinical part of her brain noted the physical symptoms of acute stress, elevated heart rate, rapid breathing, tunnel vision. The rest of her brain just screamed. "We can't stay here," Colt said. His voice was steady but strained. "This log won't hold forever. We need to move." "Move where?" "They've got the high ground and clear sight lines. There's a ravine about 50 yards northeast. If we can reach it, we'll have cover and a way down to the lower trail." 50 yards. Mara looked at the open ground between their position and the tree line. "We'll be exposed the entire way." "I know. You can barely walk. Your wounds will matter even less if we're dead." Colt met her eyes. "On 3, we run. Don't stop. Don't look back. Just run." "Colt, 1." Another bullet slammed into the log, closer this time. 2. Mara's legs tensed. This was insane. They'd be cut down before they made it 10 feet. 3. They ran. Mara had never moved so fast in her life. Her legs pumped, her boots slipped, and caught on hidden rocks beneath the snow, and the world narrowed to just forward, just move, just survive. Beside her, Colt ran with a lurching, uneven gait, his left leg barely supporting his weight, but he ran. The first shot missed her by inches. The second kicked up snow at her feet. She heard Colt grunt, whether from pain or a hit she couldn't tell, but he kept moving. The trees were getting closer. 30 yards. 20. A bullet caught her coat, spinning her halfway around. She stumbled, went down on one knee, and Colt grabbed her arm with brutal strength, dragging her forward even as his own breath came in ragged gasps. "Don't stop! Don't stop!" They crashed into this tree line together, and immediately the ground disappeared beneath them. Mara had just enough time to realize they'd found the ravine before gravity took over and they were falling, sliding, tumbling down a steep embankment in a chaos of snow and stone and pain. She hit bottom hard, her shoulder slamming into something solid. The impact drove the air from her lungs and stars exploded across her vision. For a moment, she just lay there, stunned and gasping. "Mara." Colt's voice, rough with pain. "Mara, talk to me." She coughed, tasting blood. She'd bitten her tongue in the fall. "I'm okay. You?" "Been better." He was lying a few feet away, half buried in snow. "Anything broken?" Mara did a mental inventory. Everything hurt, but the pain was general rather than specific. No sharp agony that suggested fractures. "I don't think so." "You?" Ribs might be cracked. Hard to tell. He tried to sit up and immediately collapsed back with a strangled sound. Definitely reopened everything else. Mara crawled to him, ignoring her own pain. His coat was dark with fresh blood, and when she opened it, she saw that at least half his stitches had torn. The chest wounds were bleeding freely. "We need to stop this," she said, already reaching for her medical bag. Then she remembered. The bag had been on her hip when they ran. She looked around frantically. There, lying in the snow 10 feet up the ravine where it had fallen during their tumble, Mara climbed back up, her hands shaking from adrenaline and cold. Above, she could hear shouts, the shooters regrouping, trying to find where their targets had disappeared. She grabbed the bag and slid back down to Colt. "This is going to hurt," she warned. "Everything hurts. Do it." She worked fast, using snow to clean the worst of the blood, packing the deepest wounds with cloth torn from her own petticoat. It wasn't sterile, it wasn't proper, but it would keep him from bleeding out in the next hour, and that was all that mattered. "Why isn't Reeves giving up?" Mara muttered as she tied off a makeshift bandage. "His men abandoned him. We have evidence. Thomas is going to the marshal. This is over. Men like Reeves don't give up." Colt's voice was tight with pain. "They double down. If he can't win, he'll make sure everyone loses." "That's insane. That's power. He's spent years building his authority in Black Hollow. Now it's crumbling. He's got nothing left to lose." Footsteps crunched in the snow above them. Voices called out, coordinating search patterns. At least 3 different men from the sound of it. Maybe more. "We need to move," Colt said. "This ravine runs for about a mile, comes out near the lower pass. If we can reach it before they find us..." "You can't walk a mile. Look at you." "I'll manage." "Colt?" "I said I'll manage." He grabbed a low-hanging branch and pulled himself upright through sheer stubborn will. His face went white and sweat broke across his forehead despite the cold, but he stayed standing. "Let's go." They moved through the ravine like ghosts, staying low, using the irregular terrain for cover. Every 50 feet, Colt had to stop and lean against the rock wall, breathing hard, but he never complained. Mara kept one hand on his good arm, ready to catch him if he fell. The voices above them faded, then grew louder again as the searchers spread out. Once, a man appeared on the ridge directly overhead, so close Mara could see the frost on his beard. They pressed themselves against the rock and didn't breathe until he moved on. After what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, the ravine began to widen and shallow. Ahead, Mara could see where it opened onto a broader trail. "Almost there," she whispered. That's when she heard the distinctive sound of a gun being cocked. "Don't move." Mara froze. Slowly, she turned her head. Sheriff Dalton Reeves stood 15 feet away, his pistol aimed directly at Colt's chest. He looked different than he had on the mountain, disheveled, wild-eyed, his usual composure completely shattered. His coat was torn, and his face bore scratches from pushing through brush. "Thought you were clever, didn't you?" Reeves advanced slowly, his gun never wavering. "Thought you could make a fool of me in front of my own men. Thought you could destroy everything I've built." "You destroyed it yourself," Colt said. His voice was steady, despite the gun pointed at him. "The moment you tried to have me killed, I gave you chances, multiple chances to sell that land fair and square. But no, you had to be stubborn, had to make everything difficult." Reeves's finger tightened on the trigger. "And you..." He swung the gun toward Mara. "You had to play hero, couldn't just leave well enough alone." "Put the gun down, Dalton." A new voice, firm and authoritative. Deputy Thomas stepped out from behind a cluster of pines, his own weapon drawn and aimed at the sheriff. Behind him came the 3 hired men from the mountain, all armed, all looking grim. Reeves's face went from white to red. "Thomas? What the hell are you? You quit! You walked away." "I did, and then I went to find these gentlemen." Thomas gestured to the hired guns. "Convince them that testifying against you was better than running. We've been tracking you for the past 2 hours. You're making a mistake, all of you. I'm still the sheriff. I still have..." "You have nothing." Thomas moved closer, his gun never wavering. "It's over, Dalton. Lower your weapon." For a long moment, Reeves just stood there. His gun moved between Colt and Thomas, indecision written across his face. Then slowly, his arm lowered. "That's it," Thomas said. "Now place it on the ground and step back." Reeves bent down as if to comply. Then, in a movement too fast to track, he grabbed the gun with both hands and swung it back up toward Colt. 3 shots fired simultaneously. Reeves's body jerked backward, the gun falling from his hands. He stood for a moment, looking down at the spreading red stains across his chest with an expression of profound surprise. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed into the snow. Thomas reached him first, kicking the fallen pistol away and checking for a pulse. After a moment, he looked up and shook his head. He's gone. Mara felt Colt sag against her, and she wrapped her arms around him, supporting his weight. Around them, the forest had gone silent except for the whisper of wind through the pines. "Anyone hurt?" Thomas asked, holstering his weapon. "Colt's wounds reopened," Mara said. "He needs proper medical attention. There's a settlement about 3 miles east. Small place, but they've got a doctor of sorts. Can you make it that far?" Colt nodded weakly. With help. 2 of the hired men fashioned a rough travois from pine branches and blankets. It wasn't comfortable, but it kept Colt from having to walk. They made slow progress through the forest, nobody speaking much. The reality of what had just happened was still settling in. Reeves was dead. The man who'd controlled Black Hollow for nearly a decade, who'd built his power through intimidation and corruption, was lying in the snow with 3 bullets in his chest. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Mara just felt tired. The settlement was called Pine Ridge, barely more than a dozen buildings clustered around a trading post. The doctor turned out to be a grizzled trapper who'd picked up field medicine during his years in the wilderness. He took one look at Colt and whistled low. "Bear attack, you said?" "Among other things," Mara replied. The man whose name was Silas worked through the night, restitching Colt's wounds with surprising skill. Mara assisted, grateful to have proper lighting and a real surgery table, even if that table was just a door balanced on sawhorses. "You did good work up there," Silas commented as he tied off the last suture. "Most folks would have lost the arm. You saved it." "I did what I could. That's more than most." He stood wiping his hands. "He'll need weeks of rest. Those ribs are definitely cracked, possibly broken. The chest wounds are deep. If infection sets in again, I'll watch him." Mara met the old man's eyes. "I'm not going anywhere." Silas studied her for a moment, then nodded. "I believe you. There's a cabin out back. Usually rent it to trappers passing through. You 2 can stay as long as you need. No charge, considering the circumstances." "We can pay. I'm out." "Didn't say you couldn't. Said you don't have to." He pulled a blanket over Colt's sleeping form. "Any enemy of Dalton Reeves is a friend of mine. Man's been bleeding this territory dry for years. About time someone stood up to him." Deputy Thomas and the hired men stayed in Pine Ridge for 2 days, taking statements and documenting everything that had happened. Thomas sent a rider to the territorial marshal with a full report, including testimony from all witnesses and the physical evidence from Colt's land. "The marshal will want to talk to both of you eventually," Thomas told Mara on the second evening. But given Colt's condition and the circumstances, he said it can wait. He's sending a federal investigator to look into Reeves's other dealings. Sounds like this goes deeper than just one attempted murder. How deep? Land fraud, bribery, embezzlement from the territorial fund? Reeves had his fingers in a lot of pies. Thomas shook his head. Black Hollow's going to need a new sheriff, probably a new mayor too, once folks find out how much the old one knew. "What about us? Are we clear?" "Far as the law is concerned, yeah. Self-defense, multiple witnesses, you're both free to go wherever you want." He paused. "You planning to go back to Black Hollow?" Mara looked toward the cabin where Colt was sleeping. "No, I don't think we are." "Can't say I blame you. Town didn't treat either of you right." Thomas stood, preparing to leave. "For what it's worth, Miss Whitaker, you've got more courage than half the men I've served with. What you did up on that mountain, riding into the storm, saving Colt, standing up to Reeves, that's the kind of thing people should remember. I just did what needed doing. That's what makes it brave." He tipped his hat. "Take care of yourself. And him." After Thomas and the others left, Pine Ridge settled back into its quiet rhythm. Mara spent her days caring for Colt, changing his bandages, monitoring his slow improvement. Silas taught her about mountain medicine, which plants could fight infection, how to set bones with limited supplies, ways to manage pain without laudanum when supplies ran low. "You're a natural," he said one afternoon as Mara successfully treated a trapper's badly infected hand. "You've got the skills and the temperament. Mountains could use someone like you." "I was thinking the same thing," Mara admitted. Colt's recovery was slow but steady. After a week, he could sit up without help. After 2, he could walk short distances. The chest wounds were healing cleanly, and his arm, while stiff, showed no signs of permanent damage beyond the scars. They didn't talk much about what came next. It was like they'd made an unspoken agreement to focus on just getting through each day. But Mara felt it hovering between them, the future, waiting to be claimed. One evening, 3 weeks after the shooting, Colt walked outside unaided for the first time. Mara found him sitting on a fallen log, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of orange and purple. She sat beside him. "How do you feel?" "Like I got torn apart by a bear and shot at by a corrupt sheriff." He smiled slightly. "But alive. Definitely alive." "That's good." They sat in silence for a while, watching the light fade. Finally, Colt spoke. "I've been thinking about what you said, about building something here, a medical practice for the mountain communities." And I think it's a good idea. Great idea, actually. These settlements are spread out, isolated. Most of them are a week's ride from the nearest real doctor. People die from things that could be easily treated if they just had access to proper care. "It wouldn't be easy," Mara said. "Supplies would be hard to get. Payment would be irregular. We'd be traveling constantly. We'd also be helping people who actually need help, not just treating the town elite who can afford to pay." Colt turned to look at her. "And we'd be doing it together." There it was again. Together. The word that had sustained them through danger and doubt. "There's something I need to know first," Mara said. "That day in the cabin when you asked me to stay, was that just gratitude talking? The wounded man clinging to his rescuer?" "No." "Colt, so?" "I mean it, Mara. No." He took her hand, his grip still weak but warm. "I've been alone for 20 years. I chose that. Built walls to keep everyone out because it was easier than risking connection. Then you rode through a blizzard to save my life, and those walls didn't mean anything anymore. You barely knew me. I knew enough. I knew you were brave when everyone said you couldn't be, strong when they called you weak, determined when they dismissed you as foolish." He squeezed her hand. "I knew you saw me as a person worth saving when the whole town wanted me dead. That tells me everything I need to know." Mara felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm scared," she admitted. "What if we're wrong? What if this is just trauma bonding and desperation, and we wake up 6 months from now and realize we made a huge mistake? Then we deal with it, together." Colt smiled. "But I don't think we're wrong. I think we found something real in the worst possible circumstances. And yeah, maybe that's not the romantic story people want to hear. Maybe it's messy and complicated and came from blood and pain. But it's ours." "Ours," Mara repeated softly. "So what do you say? Want to build something impossible with me?" She thought about Black Hollow, about the life she was leaving behind, the town that had never valued her, the patients who'd used her skills but never saw her person, the years of being invisible, useful, forgettable. Then she thought about the mountain families she'd met in Pine Ridge, the trappers and settlers and isolated homesteaders who needed help but had nowhere to turn. The children with fevers and broken bones and infections, the mothers struggling through difficult pregnancies with no medical support. She thought about waking up every morning with purpose, being needed, yes, but also being seen, being herself fully and completely without apology. "Yes," she said, "let's build something impossible." Colt's smile was worth every risk. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, and kissed her gently. It was careful and awkward and perfect, and when they broke apart, Mara was laughing. "What?" Colt asked. "Nothing. Everything. This whole situation is completely insane." "Completely," he agreed, "but I wouldn't change it. Neither would I." They sat on that log until full dark, making plans. They'd return to Colt's cabin and expand it, adding a proper examination room and space for patients who needed overnight care. Mara would travel to the nearby settlements, establishing a circuit of medical care. Colt would help where he could, using his knowledge of the mountains to navigate the dangerous terrain. It wouldn't be easy. They'd face harsh winters, supply shortages, patients who couldn't pay. They'd be exhausted, frustrated, probably arguing more than they should, but they'd be doing it together, building something from nothing, creating purpose from pain. The next morning, word came from the territorial marshal. Reeves' corruption had been even more extensive than anyone realized. The investigation had uncovered embezzlement, land fraud, and connections to criminal enterprises across 3 territories. Black Hollow was in chaos, the power vacuum causing fights over who would lead. They're asking if you'll come back, the messenger told Mara. The town council. They said they were wrong about you, said they want you to be the head nurse at the new medical clinic they're building. Mara read the letter with a strange detachment. 6 weeks ago, this would have been everything she wanted: recognition, respect, an official position instead of just being Doc Patterson's assistant. Now it felt hollow. What should I tell them? The messenger asked. Tell them thank you, but no. Tell them I've found where I'm needed. The man nodded and rode off. Colt, who'd been standing nearby, moved to her side. Any regrets? Not a single one. They left Pine Ridge a week later, traveling slowly to accommodate Colt's still healing injuries. Silas sent them off with extra medical supplies and a list of settlements that needed help. You're doing a good thing, he said. Both of you. Mountains eat people alive, but you two? I think you're going to thrive. The journey back to Colt's cabin took 3 days. When they finally arrived, the place looked different to Mara. Not just a rough shelter, but a beginning. The foundation of something larger. They worked through the remaining weeks of winter, planning and preparing. Colt sketched designs for the expansion, while Mara inventoried supplies and made lists of what they'd need. When weather permitted, he began felling trees for lumber. His injuries healed slowly, leaving him with permanent scars and a slight limp that bothered him more than he admitted. But he was alive and growing stronger every day. Mara found herself changing too. The physical work, chopping wood, hauling water, helping with construction, built muscle and confidence. She stopped seeing her body as something to apologize for and started seeing it as the tool that let her accomplish everything she needed to do. And when she caught Colt watching her with that particular look in his eyes, she didn't feel ashamed of her size. She felt powerful. Spring came early that year, melting the snow and opening the trails. Their first patient arrived in early April, a homesteader's wife, heavily pregnant and having complications. Mara delivered the baby in the newly expanded cabin, with Colt assisting and the grateful father pacing outside. When mother and child were both safe and sleeping, the father tried to pay them. We don't have much, he said, holding out a small pouch of coins. But you saved them, both of them. Mara looked at Colt, who nodded slightly. Keep your money, she said. When you have extra food or supplies, you can bring us some. Otherwise, just tell your neighbors that there's help available up here if they need it. Word spread faster than they'd expected. Within a month, they were seeing patients regularly. Injured trappers, sick children, women needing prenatal care, men with old wounds that had never healed properly. Some paid in cash, most in trade. They accepted everything from dried meat to hand-sewn blankets to offers of labor. The cabin became more than just a home. It became a refuge. One evening in late spring, after a particularly long day of treating patients, Mara and Colt sat on the porch watching the sunset. They developed a routine of these quiet moments, times when they could just exist together without the pressure of survival or medical emergencies. I got a letter today, Colt said, from Deputy Thomas. He's the new sheriff of Black Hollow. That's good. He'll do right by people. He also said the town's been asking about you, wondering if you're okay. Mara smiled slightly. Funny how they care now. Human nature. People don't value what they have until it's gone. Colt reached over and took her hand. Their loss is my gain. Ours, Mara corrected. Our gain. Ours, he agreed. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the mountains catch fire in the dying light. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. An owl answered. The forest was alive with sounds they'd both learned to read like a language. Do you ever miss it? Colt asked. Town life? Civilization? Regular meals and soft beds and not having to worry about bears? Mara considered the question honestly. Sometimes I miss the conveniences, hot baths, fresh bread from the bakery, not having to ration medical supplies. She squeezed his hand. But I don't miss being invisible, and I don't miss the person I was there. Who are you here? Necessary, capable, seen. She turned to look at him. Loved? It was the first time either of them had used the word. It hung in the air between them, fragile and powerful. Colt's expression softened. Loved, he confirmed. Completely and absolutely loved. Good. Mara leaned her head against his shoulder. Because you're loved too. Even when you're stubborn and refuse to rest and insist on splitting firewood when your ribs are still healing. I wasn't that bad. You were terrible. Silas wanted to tie you to the bed. He tried. You stopped him. Someone has to keep you alive. She smiled against his shoulder. Might as well be me. They stayed on the porch until the stars came out, making plans for the future. They'd need to expand again before winter, add another room for patients who needed extended care. They'd need more medical supplies, which meant either a long journey to the territorial capital or figuring out which traveling merchants to trust. They'd need help too, eventually. Maybe an apprentice who could learn frontier medicine, someone young and eager, willing to work hard in exchange for knowledge. The challenges were endless, but so were the possibilities. Marry me, Colt said suddenly. Mara lifted her head, startled. What? Marry me. Make this official. He shifted to face her properly. I know it's soon. I know we've only been together a few months, but I also know I don't want to spend another day of my life without you in it. So marry me. We're in the middle of nowhere. There's no preacher, no legal. We'll figure it out. We always do. He cupped her face in his hands. I love you, Mara Whitaker. You're the bravest, strongest, most remarkable person I've ever met. Will you marry me? Mara felt tears streaming down her face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. Yes. Yes, absolutely yes. They kissed on the porch of their impossible cabin, two people who'd been dismissed and forgotten by the world, choosing each other in defiance of every odd. In the distance, thunder rumbled, another storm rolling in across the mountains. But inside their walls, beside the fire they'd built together, Mara and Colt were safe. They were home, and they were exactly where they belonged. The wedding happened on a Tuesday in June, which seemed fitting given that nothing about their relationship had followed conventional rules. They'd ridden down to Pine Ridge 3 days earlier to find Silas and a handful of witnesses. There was no white dress, no flowers, no carefully planned ceremony. Mara wore her best wool skirt and a clean cotton blouse. Colt had trimmed his beard and put on a shirt without bloodstains. Silas performed the ceremony in front of the trading post, reading from a battered book of territorial law that gave him authority to officiate in remote settlements. Do you, Colt Mercer, take this woman as your lawfully wedded wife? I do. And do you, Mara Whitaker, take this man as your lawfully wedded husband? I do. Then by the authority vested in me by the territorial government, I pronounce you married. You can kiss her if you want, though I suspect you've already figured that part out. The small crowd laughed. Colt kissed Mara anyway, and she felt something settle in her chest that had been restless her entire life. Not completion, she'd never needed someone else to complete her, but partnership, recognition, the certainty that she'd chosen right. They spent that night in the cabin behind the trading post, and in the morning, a young woman knocked on their door. My name's Rebecca Hayes, she said. She was maybe 19, thin and nervous, with intelligent eyes and hands that wouldn't stay still. Silas said you're looking for someone to apprentice, to learn medicine. Mara studied her. What makes you think you'd be good at it? I'm not squeamish. I can read and write. And I helped my mother deliver babies back in our settlement until she died last winter. Rebecca's voice caught slightly. There's nobody to help folks now. I want to learn so I can be useful. There was that word again, useful. Mara heard her younger self in it, the desperate need to have value, to justify existence through service to others. Being useful isn't enough, Mara said gently. You have to want it for yourself, not just for other people. Rebecca looked surprised, then thoughtful. I do want it for myself. I want to know things, understand how the body works, how to fix what's broken. Is that selfish? No, that's honest. Mara glanced at Colt, who nodded. Come back to the cabin with us. We'll start your training there. But I'm warning you, it's hard work, long hours, a lot of failure before you see success, and the pay is whatever people can afford, which is often nothing. I don't need pay. I need purpose. Then you'll fit right in. They returned to the mountain cabin as a trio. Rebecca proved to be a quick study, absorbing medical knowledge like a sponge and showing remarkable composure during difficult procedures. Within weeks, she was handling minor injuries independently and assisting Mara with the more complex cases. She reminds me of someone, Colt said one evening after Rebecca had successfully stitched up a trapper's lacerated arm. Who? You. 6 months ago. Determined to prove everyone wrong about what she could do. Mara watched Rebecca carefully cleaning and organizing the medical supplies. The difference is, she's getting the training and support I never had. Nobody's telling her she can't do this because of how she looks or where she came from. You're giving her what you needed, Colt observed. That's good. That's how things change. But change, Mara was learning, came slowly and with resistance. Their third month of operation brought a patient who tested everything they'd built. A man named Douglas Warren rode up one afternoon with his 12-year-old daughter, Sarah, cradled in his arms. The girl was burning with fever, her breathing labored and wet. Please, Douglas begged. The doctor in Black Hollow said there was nothing he could do, said to take her home and make her comfortable. But I heard about you folks. Heard you help people when nobody else will. Mara examined Sarah quickly. Pneumonia, advanced and aggressive. The girl's lungs were filling with fluid, and without intervention, she had maybe 2 days left. I can try, Mara said, but I need you to understand this is serious. Even with treatment, she might not make it. But there's a chance? There's a chance. Then do whatever you can. Mara worked around the clock for 3 days. She drained fluid from Sarah's lungs using a hollow reed, a technique Silas had taught her that most traditional doctors dismissed as barbaric. She administered steam treatments with herbs that opened the airways. She forced liquids down the girl's throat even when Sarah fought her, knowing that dehydration would kill her as surely as the infection. Rebecca assisted without complaint, learning through observation and occasionally asking sharp questions that showed she understood the stakes. Colt kept Douglas fed and calm, talking him through the worst moments when Sarah's breathing grew so shallow it seemed like it might stop altogether. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Sarah opened her eyes, asked for water, and smiled weakly at her father. Douglas wept. Then he tried to pay them everything he had, 2 months' worth of wages from his work at a lumber mill. Keep it, Mara said. Use it to take care of your daughter. But I have to pay you something. You saved her life. Then bring us news of how she's doing. That's payment enough. After they left, Rebecca spoke up. We could have used that money. Our medical supplies are running low. We could have, Mara agreed, but taking it would have broken him. Some people need to keep their money more than we need to have it. How do you decide who pays and who doesn't? You don't decide, you just know. Mara started cleaning the examination area. The wealthy businessman who falls off his horse? He pays, and pays well. The widow trying to feed 3 children? She brings us eggs when she can. You take what people can afford to give and you make it work. That doesn't seem sustainable. It's not. Not by traditional standards, but we're not trying to build a traditional practice. Mara paused, considering how to explain it. Money's important, but it's not the measure of success here. Success is Sarah breathing. It's that trapper keeping his arm. It's women surviving childbirth. That's what we're building. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. In town, the doctors won't see you if you can't pay. I've watched people die because they couldn't afford treatment. I know. I watched it too. Mara met the younger woman's eyes. That's why we do this differently. Word of Sarah's recovery spread through the mountain communities like wildfire. Within weeks, their patient load tripled. Families traveled for days to reach the cabin, bringing everything from serious injuries to routine ailments. Some could pay, most couldn't, and Mara turned none of them away. The work was exhausting. Mara often fell into bed too tired to speak, her hands cramping from hours of stitching or setting bones. Colt worried about her, trying to get her to rest more, but she couldn't, not when people needed help. You're going to burn out, he warned one night after she'd worked 18 hours straight. You can't save everyone, Mara. I can try. At what cost? You're barely eating. You barely sleep. When was the last time you took a full day off? There's too much to do. There will always be too much to do. That's not the point. Colt sat beside her, taking her hand. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. And you're teaching Rebecca that destroying yourself is normal. That got through. Mara looked up sharply. What? She works as hard as you do, copies everything you do, including the part where you ignore your own needs. His voice was gentle but firm. You're her mentor. She's learning more than medicine from you. Mara thought about that for a long time. She'd been so focused on teaching Rebecca technical skills that she hadn't considered what other lessons her behavior conveyed. The next morning, she pulled Rebecca aside. We're taking today off, Mara announced. Rebecca looked confused. But there are 3 patients scheduled, and they can wait or reschedule. Today we rest. I don't understand. You will. Mara led her outside where Colt was already preparing horses. We're going to ride up to the North Ridge. There's a meadow up there with wildflowers this time of year. We're going to sit in the sun and do absolutely nothing productive. That seems wasteful. That's because you think your value comes from what you produce. Mara swung up onto Dolly, who'd long since forgiven her for the blizzard ride. But it doesn't. You're valuable because you exist. The work is important, but it's not who you are. They spent the day in the meadow, doing nothing of consequence. Rebecca was twitchy at first, clearly uncomfortable with idleness. But gradually she relaxed, lying back in the grass and watching clouds drift across the sky. My mother never rested, she said eventually. She worked until the day she died, literally. She was delivering a baby when her heart gave out. I'm sorry. Everyone said she was a saint, so dedicated, so selfless. Rebecca's voice was flat. But I was angry at her. Is that terrible? I was angry because she worked herself to death and left me alone. It's not terrible. It's human. I don't want to be like that. I don't want to die young because I couldn't say no. Then don't. Mara plucked a wildflower and twirled it between her fingers. Learn to rest. Learn that your worth isn't measured in how much you suffer or sacrifice. Learn that taking care of yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Did you learn that? Mara laughed. I'm still learning it. Colt has to remind me constantly, but I'm trying. They rode back as the sun was setting, and Mara felt something shift in herself. She'd spent so many years proving her worth through work that she'd forgotten work was supposed to serve life, not replace it. That night, curled against Colt in their bed, she said, "Thank you." For what? For making me stop, for caring enough to call me out. Someone has to keep you alive, he said, echoing her words from months ago. Might as well be me. Summer deepened into something rich and full. The cabin expansion was finally complete. 2 additional rooms for patients, a proper examination area, and a small dispensary for storing medicines. Rebecca had her own quarters attached to the main building, and she'd begun keeping detailed medical records of every case they treated. For posterity, she explained when Mara asked why. Someday someone might want to know what we did here, how we helped people. You think what we're doing matters that much? I think it matters more than you realize. News of their work reached beyond the immediate mountain communities. A journalist from the territorial capital rode up one day, asking to interview the frontier nurse who defied a corrupt sheriff and built a medical practice in the wilderness. Mara wanted to refuse, but Colt convinced her otherwise. Let him tell the story, Colt said. Not for us, but for all the other isolated communities who need to know this kind of thing is possible. The article appeared 6 weeks later. It was largely accurate, though it romanticized certain aspects and made Mara sound more heroic than she felt. But it had the intended effect. Other frontier nurses began writing letters, asking for advice on starting similar practices. Medical supply companies offered donations. Even the territorial government sent a small grant to support their work. Look at this, Rebecca said one morning, holding up a letter. A woman in Wyoming wants to know if she can visit and learn from us. She's been nursing for 10 years but wants to understand our model. Their model. As if what they'd built through desperation and necessity was something that could be replicated. But maybe it could. Over the next year, they hosted 3 visiting nurses who stayed for weeks at a time, learning frontier medicine and community-based care. Each of them returned to their own territories and started similar practices. The movement grew organically, spread through word of mouth and determination. We're starting something bigger than us, Colt observed one evening. That's terrifying, Mara admitted. Why? Because what if we're wrong? What if this model doesn't work everywhere? What if someone gets hurt because they tried to replicate what we do without understanding the full picture? Then they'll adapt. Figure out what works for them. Colt pulled her close. You can't control how people use your example. You can only keep doing the work and trust that good intentions lead to good outcomes more often than not. In their 2nd year of marriage, Mara discovered she was pregnant. The realization came gradually. Missed courses she initially attributed to stress, nausea she blamed on bad jerky, fatigue that seemed excessive even for her demanding schedule. When the truth finally became undeniable, she sat on the porch for an hour processing it. A baby. She was going to have a baby. The woman everyone said was too fat, too unmarriageable, too undesirable. She was going to be a mother. When she told Colt, he went absolutely still. Say something, Mara prompted. I'm terrified, he admitted. I don't know how to be a father. I barely know how to be a husband. What if I'm terrible at it? What if you're wonderful at it? That seems statistically unlikely. So did us surviving Reeves. So did building this practice. So did any of this. Mara took his hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. We've made a habit of doing impossible things. Why stop now? Colt's eyes were wet. A baby. We're having a baby. We are. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. Good. I'd be worried if you weren't scared. Fear means you understand the stakes. The pregnancy was difficult. Mara's body, strong as it was, struggled with the additional demands. She developed complications in the 3rd month that required bed rest, which drove her absolutely insane. Rebecca and Colt took over most of the medical work while Mara directed from bed, issuing instructions and fretting constantly. I'm useless like this, she complained. You're growing a human, Rebecca pointed out. That's the opposite of useless. I should be working. You are working. Your body's doing the hardest work there is. The words echoed what Mara had told Rebecca about rest and value, and she heard the lesson reflected back at her. Her worth wasn't measured in patients seen or procedures performed. It existed independent of productivity. It was a hard lesson to internalize. The baby, a girl, was born on a freezing January night during one of the worst storms Mara had seen since that first blizzard. The irony wasn't lost on her. Rebecca delivered the baby with Colt's assistance while Mara did her best not to scream loud enough to start an avalanche. When they placed the tiny, red-faced infant in her arms, Mara felt something crack open in her chest. This small person, completely dependent and utterly perfect, had chosen to exist, had fought through complications and difficulty to be born. She's a fighter, Colt said, touching the baby's impossibly small hand. She'd have to be, with us as parents. Mara was crying and laughing simultaneously. What should we name her? They'd discussed names for months without settling on anything, but looking at her daughter now, Mara knew. Hope, she said. Her name is Hope, because that's what she represented. Hope that the world could be different. Hope that strength came in unexpected packages. Hope that people dismissed and overlooked could build something extraordinary. Hope that love, in all its messy, complicated, imperfect forms, was worth fighting for. The years that followed were full in ways Mara had never imagined. Hope grew from infant to toddler to a bright, curious child who followed Rebecca around asking endless questions about medicine and anatomy. The practice continued to expand, with 2 more apprentices joining and eventually establishing satellite clinics in other mountain communities. Colt's land, the land he'd nearly died defending, became the foundation of a network of frontier medical care that served hundreds of families across 3 territories. The timber companies eventually gave up trying to acquire it, realizing that the public relations nightmare of displacing a beloved medical practice outweighed any potential profit. Deputy Thomas, now Sheriff Thomas, visited occasionally with news from Black Hollow. The town had changed in the years since Reeves's death. New leadership, new attitudes, genuine attempts to address the corruption that had festered for so long. They ask about you sometimes, Thomas told Mara during one visit. Want to know if you're happy? Tell them I am. They also want to know if you'd ever consider coming back. The medical clinic could use someone with your skills. Mara looked around at the cabin, at Hope playing with wooden blocks while Rebecca taught a new apprentice how to properly clean instruments, at Colt working on expanding the garden to grow medicinal herbs, at the life they'd built from nothing. Tell them I'm exactly where I belong. On a spring morning, 5 years after that first desperate ride through the blizzard, Mara stood on the porch watching the sunrise paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. Hope was 6 now, already helping with simple medical tasks and showing her mother's stubborn determination. Rebecca had become a skilled practitioner in her own right, handling complex cases independently and teaching the newer apprentices with patience and wisdom. Colt came up behind Mara, wrapping his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything. Nothing. How strange life is. Strange how? 6 years ago, I was invisible. Nobody in Black Hollow saw me. Nobody valued me beyond what I could do for them. I'd convinced myself that was all I deserved. She leaned back against him. Now look at this. Look at what we built. You built it. I just helped. We built it together. That's the point. She turned to face him. I've been thinking about what we tell Hope when she's older, about where we came from, how this started. We tell her the truth. Which truth? That her father was nearly murdered by a corrupt sheriff? That her mother was mocked and dismissed by everyone who knew her? That we came together through violence and desperation? Yes. Colt's voice was firm. We tell her all of it. Because the truth isn't just the dark parts. It's also that people can be stronger than they believe. That love comes from unexpected places. That being dismissed by the world doesn't mean you're worth less. It often means you're worth more than they're capable of seeing. You think she'll understand? I think she'll understand that her parents refused to accept the limitations other people tried to put on them. And that's the most important lesson we can teach her. A rider appeared on the trail, a man Mara didn't recognize, leading a horse with someone slumped in the saddle. Even from a distance, she could see blood. Here we go again, Colt murmured. Mara was already moving, calling for Rebecca, mentally inventorying their supplies. This was the work. This was the life they'd chosen. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. The rider reached the cabin and dismounted, helping the injured person, a young woman, down from the horse. Please, the man said. We heard you help people. My sister got thrown from her horse and... Bring her inside, Mara cut him off, all business now. Rebecca, prep the examination table. Colt, boil water. Move. They worked through the afternoon, saving the young woman's life. Broken ribs, internal bleeding, a concussion that required careful monitoring. It was complicated and difficult, and exactly the kind of case that made Mara feel alive. When the woman was stabilized and sleeping, her brother tried to pay them. We don't have much money, he said. But I'm a carpenter. I could build you something. Anything you need. Mara considered. We could use better storage for medical supplies. Something with drawers and shelves, properly organized. I can do that. I'll start tomorrow. You should stay with your sister. She'll need you when she wakes up. You can start when she's recovered enough to travel home. The man's eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? You don't even know us. That's exactly why we're doing this, Mara said simply. Later that night, after all the patients were settled and Hope was asleep, Mara sat with Colt on the porch under a sky absolutely packed with stars. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't ridden up that mountain? She asked. You'd have died in town, invisible and alone. I'd have died in that cabin, forgotten and unmourned, and hundreds of people who've received care here would have suffered or died without help. Colt squeezed her hand. But you did ride up that mountain. You made a choice that changed everything. We both made choices. That's how change happens. One choice at a time. One person deciding that the way things are isn't the way things have to be. Mara thought about all the people who'd told her she couldn't survive the mountain, couldn't save Colt, couldn't stand against Reeves, couldn't build a medical practice in the wilderness, couldn't be loved or valued or seen. She'd proven every single one of them wrong. Not through dramatic gestures or grand declarations, but through the daily work of showing up, of doing what needed to be done even when it was hard, of choosing love and purpose over comfort and acceptance. I think, she said slowly, I think the greatest act of defiance is becoming who you're meant to be when everyone says you can't. Is that what we did? That's exactly what we did. They sat in silence, watching the stars wheel overhead. Somewhere in the cabin, Hope murmured in her sleep. Rebecca was probably still up, reading medical texts by lamplight. The injured woman breathed steadily, healing. The world had tried to make them invisible. Instead, they'd become exactly what they needed to be, not in spite of the hardship and rejection, but because of it. The pain had forged them. The dismissal had freed them. The battle had revealed who they really were underneath all the expectations and limitations. And what they'd found underneath was stronger than anyone imagined. Mara Whitaker, the fat nurse nobody wanted, had ridden into a blizzard and changed the world. Not the whole world, maybe, but her world, and Colt's world, and the worlds of hundreds of people who'd found help and hope in the cabin on the mountain. That was enough. More than enough. It was everything.